Welcome to Whispers of Nafsia, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of mental health, healing, and personal growth. I'm Asya, one of the hosts, and I'm here with my incredible team, which is dedicated to creating a safe space for open conversations about mental health, because everyone deserves to feel seen, heard, and supported. I'd like to remind our listeners that the views and opinions shared on Whispers of Nafsia are personal perspectives meant to encourage thought and conversation. Any advice or insights offered by myself or the team are based on our own experiences and research. When we do refer to Islamic teachings, we ensure to reference the knowledge of qualified scholars, and any professional guidance shared comes directly from experienced professionals. If you're seeking specific advice for your situation, we encourage you to consult a trusted professional or scholar for personalized support. Thank you for understanding. And now, let's dive in. Today we are talking about a crucial topic, marriage and mental health. Many couples struggle in silence, feeling ashamed to talk about their challenges. There's a stigma around seeking therapy or discussing marital problems, even though Islam acknowledges that marriage is both a blessing and a test. Understanding our emotions and mental health is key to a healthy relationship. When we work on ourselves, we can improve our marriages.
Before we begin, we would like to welcome our special guest for today's episode, Sheikh Wael Al-Zain. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We're so glad you could be here with us today. Sheikh began his speaking career in 2004 at the Muhammad Majlis in Toronto. Since then, he has delivered lectures across Canada, the U.S.A., the U.K., and Dubai. In 2006, he joined the Imam Hussein Foundation Hausa in Windsor to expand his studies. Now based in Ottawa, he continues to serve the podium of Imam Hussein. Sheikh Wael has established youth programs in Ontario and co-founded the 313 Youth Organization, which became the Arc of Excellence, offering religious, academic, and recreational programs. He has lectured at numerous centers across North America and internationally. Welcome, Sheikh.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
We're going to kick things off with a fundamental question. This is also a question that we asked on our Whispers of Nafsia Instagram page through NGL. And for those of you who follow us, I'm sure you saw those responses were pretty intense. Our question was, why is marriage so hard? So digging deeper into that, why is marriage often so challenging? What makes the early years of marriage the most difficult yet crucial in setting the foundation for a lasting relationship? Sheikh Wael, tell us your thoughts.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. It's my pleasure, and I really vouch for such events, and such discussions are really important to always have in our community. And it's always good to bring up those discussions in a healthy manner. And it's always wonderful when the reference is always deen and the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet, and the Ahlul-bayt. If I were to start with the first part of the question, that makes me remember something that my grandma once told me, in fact. She said, understand that you will never understand your spouse unless you share the same pillow. So there's an expression about it. So meaning, like, as soon as you put your head on that pillow, that's when you really know a person. How often have we met people in our lives and we thought we knew them? You know, in fact, one of the most things I personally came up, I don't know if it's a theory that I invented or so forth, but nevertheless, you find that even when you get married, what I notice is that you think you know your parents. You think you know your parents, but then when you get married, you start getting to know your parents all over again. Because you start getting to know your siblings all over again, your friends, your cousins, your family, the people that are around you. They start acting in a very weird way sometimes. And sometimes you go like, why are they doing this? Or why are they acting this way? And why did my mom say this? Or why did my father say something like that? So it's interesting is that, generally speaking, is that you think you might know people, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to share with them so many experiences in order for you to know them. That's why there's a beautiful hadith by Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in this regard. He said, do not claim that you do know a person before you travel with them. Because when you travel with people, that's actually, traveling does expose people. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that many couples, as soon as they get to know each other and they travel for the honeymoon, many times they're going to argue with each other. They're going to be like, okay, listen, this is not what I'm used to. So before marriage, you're used to a certain way of life. You have developed a certain personality. Now, of course, the age plays a big, important role in this regard. So it depends on how old were you when you got married. For example, with men, the older they get before marriage, the harder it is for them to get along with someone because they tend to develop this personality that they're so independent. Yet, believe it or not, it tends to become even harder with certain women because of their career, because of what they achieved, and they have gotten used to a certain schedule throughout their day, and then all of a sudden they have to conform to someone else. There's so many things that you have to start getting used to a person on a personal level. When you get to know each other before marriage, that's what I call the honeymoon stage, believe it or not. Why? Because at that point, there's a lot of excitement. There's someone new entering your life. You're curious. You want to know so much about them. You want to know things about them. And there's a lot of conversation that will be developed in this regard, right? But then all of a sudden, when you get married and you start saying, oh, okay, what happened to this, right? Well, why aren't we talking like before? So that also happens because of other factors, is that in the beginning, you do feel as much as you think that, no, you're comfortable, you're fine, you just moved in with this person, all of a sudden you live together. But no, in reality, you do have to get to know them all over again. They're entering your own personal space, and you're doing so to them. So I would say that the first years or the first stages, I like to refer to them as stages, not necessarily years. The first stages of marriage, as soon as you get married, you move, you live with this person, things are going to be a bit difficult simply because of the clash of personalities in this regard, right? And then, on the other hand, there are other factors that could be also make things even more difficult, which is family, friends. You're going to find that there is someone that's entering your space sometimes. In many cases, you want to build your own culture with your husband or the vice versa. But then no, for example, there are certain things that you feel that you're kind of conformed by. There are things that you feel that, you're being forced to do when in some cases you don't have to do. And that's why I think that stage is the most important stage where you need to create dialogue. There has to be dialogue and transparency. There has to be transparency in all regards. You have to be very open about how you feel. And believe it or not, many people might think that, oh, that's a given. No. I've sat down with couples that have been married for 15 years, and when they opened up with each other, they were shocked. They have not yet opened up to each other, like openly, as in like they're not transparent. They're not totally open with each other, unfortunately. Both of them, and sometimes when they do open up to each other, you start realizing that maybe there isn't even an issue. Yeah. Or maybe the main issue was just not being very open about yourself.
When I first got married, I was young. I was 19. We got married 19, and you were 23.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, 19 and 23, yeah. So I think culturally, you're always told, as a girl, you're told, don't say too much, don't complain too much. Like, don't be your true self even. Almost. Okay. Don't be as transparent as you're saying we should be. Mm-hmm. And then growing up, I feel like I didn't see that transparency in the marriages around us. So I chose to do the opposite, to be transparent. I feel like we were very transparent, which is not always the easy thing to do. The first year of our marriage was very hard. And anyone who asks us, no, we're very open. We're like, the first year of our marriage was the toughest year. We tell couples right away, like, you know what, it's going to be hard. It's tough. Yeah. Like, you have to get through a lot of the hard steps in that first year.
Sheikh, when you were talking about personal space, so I was a very sports-oriented person. So, for example, out of 7 days, maybe 6 days, I was not home in the evenings playing different sports like volleyball or soccer or then when we got married, I was expecting
to continue playing sports,
to continue playing sport as much as I was, and that didn't really work out.
No, okay.
No, but we figured it out. But in the beginning, it was a little bit tough.
Yeah. SubhanAllah, I've always wondered, what is it about women that they tend to get so creative when it comes to sports? As soon as there's a match, that's when they want you to do everything. Oh, by the way, did you take out the garbage? Or did you free Palestine? There's a lot. You need to go fight in Gaza. Yeah. They always they tend to get so creative. Following up on what you said, and I really appreciate that you said that. I really believe that one needs to understand. It's always good when I spoke about transparency, especially on a woman's side, because that really matches her personality as a woman. It's so good to be that, but that's for your husband. And let me explain something to you on this regard. I'm going to tell you something, I share with you a secret about men. I'll tell you why sometimes men feel a bit uncomfortable and threatened with a woman who is very open and transparent. Because they worry that it's going to be like this in public too. And men, we tend to be a bit more private. Do you got my point? We tend to be a bit more secretive. That's just in our nature. We like things to be kept for us. And that's something that, in my opinion, I do believe that it's our right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always encouraged that. He said, like, your personality at home, just keep it for your husband. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm not saying be a totally opposite person, but no, there's nothing wrong. In reality, we do this as human beings in general. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I'm totally against the Western ideology about this, is that you need to be yourself everywhere. Absolutely not. Or like when they tell you, oh, what do you have to hide? Everything. Why do I not want to hide? No, I don't need to share stuff about myself. I don't need to expose myself the way I am. And that, in my opinion, adds a lot of sanctity to the marital relationship. Because then you would have those special moments together. But when it's shared with everybody else, then it loses its sanctity. There's nothing any more private. Like, look how Imam Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam would refer to Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam. And all these narrations, we knew them after the martyrdom of Fatima, not during her life. And of course, we don't know much. We still don't know a lot. You know what I mean? Like Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he would say, and that was like 5 years later after the martyrdom of Fatima, he said, I have never entered the house except that when I stared at the face of Fatima, all my worries went away. But why? Because Fatima would only stare at Ali that way in the house, but she wouldn't stare at him like that in public. And it's good to maintain that in a marital relationship, and even from family. And I'm a big believer in that. Even your own family, they don't have to know what you are exactly, how you are. In fact, the less you share about your spouse, the more successful the relationship is.
Yeah.
I'm going to repeat this. The less you share about your spouse, the more successful the relationship is. Because then you have put your spouse, you've shielded your spouse in a way that others don't have to enter her private life. But when you're talking about your spouse outside in public, you're allowing people. You're telling them, hey, listen, I'm giving you the green light to criticize too. You know, and it could be anything that's going on, anything that goes on inside the house, keep it behind that closed door. As soon as that door gets shut, it should not be out.
So many expect their spouse to complete them, but it's more about mutual support and not emotional dependency. How can couples shift their mindset from infatuation to a long-term commitment? And maybe we can identify ways to maintain an emotional connection beyond that honeymoon phase. I really like what Sheikh said, that sometimes that honeymoon phase is before you're even married. Like, it starts from before you're even married to them.
I think it depends. If you don't live in the same city, then the honeymoon phase is after.
Okay.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
I think if you're in a different city, that long-term, long distance relationship is not as easy to kind of bond with that person until you meet them, you go out with them. So I think in that sense, the honeymoon phase is after marriage, and then it doesn't last too long.
So I think since we are going into all of this, let me go through some stats that we've been seeing with.
It's like a scary stat to talk about, but I feel like it's important.
It is. I think these are so important for us to realize because it is an issue and we need to be able to talk about it properly and openly. 40% of divorces happen within 5 years of marriage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And is that within the Muslim community?
That's the general stat, but a smaller study found that 35% of American Muslim marriages also end in divorce. So they are following the national trends. It's not like we're far away from that. And there was a Pew Research done, and it highlighted that there were 3 main reasons, and it was financial stress, emotional dissatisfaction, and extended family interference as key factors in these issues. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your experience with divorce in Islam and just what plays a role in that area.
I would say, again, not to pretend that I'm adding something. I'm sure people that do those stats, they know what they're saying. I do have my speculations about modern psychology. I'm not going to deny that. Even Western psychology, because it's derived from the perspective and the culture, and I have an issue with that. I really think that the majority of the times, why would I personally, the first thing that would come to my mind as to why American couples would get divorced within the first 5 years of marriage, because they date for 20 years before that. And all of a sudden, when there's marriage involved and there's responsibilities and so forth, that's why, of course, they're going to get divorced. I'm a big believer, there's a riwayah, there's a narration attributed to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam where he said to a man, love the woman you marry and don't marry the woman you love. Love the woman you marry and do not marry the woman you love. I personally do not believe in love before marriage. Leave religion aside. I'll even say this. Dearly, leave religion aside. Has nothing to do with religion. Marriages that are based on a love, as in the love, what we understand as what love is in the Western culture, they're the most marriages that fail. I can tell you from my experience, when a couple are sitting down and they want to discuss divorce, you rarely find a couple sitting down maturely saying, you know what, there's nothing wrong with this person, there's nothing wrong with that person. Unfortunately, we cannot be with each other. Fighting, sure, fighting is going to happen. Fighting is a part of life. You fight with your siblings, you fight with your friends. Fighting is a part, difficulty is a part of life. There's difficulties everywhere. The unfortunate reality is that you find that couples are willing to endure difficulties at work, but not in marriage. They're willing to endure difficulties with other people, with their friends, and tolerate things, but not in marriage. So I think personally is that number one, that dating factor before marriage, yeah.
And
Sorry.
so what trends do you see Islamically?
Islamically, I would say there's a lot of talk about divorce. I would say personally what I dealt with, I do listen to people sometimes. They do refer to me, and I do hear different reasons. Finance can be an issue. Finance can be an issue. But I think it can be, the majority of the times, or the majority of the cases that I dealt with, finance was an issue when, for example, the husband does not want to try. Do you get it? Does not want to try. See, I remember one time a very wise man said something to me. He said that there's nothing wrong in marrying my daughter to a poor man. There's something wrong in marrying my daughter to a man without ambition. So poverty is not an issue. And ambition doesn't always have to be financial, by the way. I mean, like just any sort of ambition, just something that you need to do, something to sustain yourself, right? And not being totally dependent on the parents or the family, right? But there's nothing wrong in working the family business. At the end of the day, that wealth, where's it going to go? You know, you have to learn how to maintain it. So I would say, yes, sometimes that. And then the financial situation has a lot of stress to life, right? But then that's where the notion of contentment comes. That being content. The unfortunate reality, I find that people that complain about finance, not all of them, majority of them, it's always because of comparisons. Because they're looking at other couples. So and they say, oh, look what they're doing. Oh, look what they're posting on social media. Look what they're buying. Look what they show. Oh, look at the purse that she's wearing. Look you know, look at it.
Being up with the Joneses.
Oh, big time. Totally. That is very true. That is very true. And again, it's just wanting to do things. And sometimes, I think personally, from my experience, and again, I'm not claiming that this is the base, but from my experience, the majority of the times, the fight happens is when both of them work. SubhanAllah, I don't know what it is. But, and again, not that I'm saying it's wrong. I'm sure sometimes you have to, both of you work. And if you were to ask me on a personal level, I would tell you from my experience, if a woman doesn't have to work, honestly don't. Just be there, be a princess at home. Straight up. I'm not saying don't be creative. No, listen, the religion of Islam, Allah created each one of us an artist. I'm a big believer in this. Allah created an artist in each and every one of us. So even if you're a stay-at-home wife, because the unfortunate reality now, we live in an age where you're ashamed to stay, I'm a stay-at-home wife. What happened? You know what I mean? You're ashamed to say, yeah, I'm a mother. That by itself, do you understand the value of this? It's harder than any other job you can ever have. So I really think that having a job outside also really affects a lot. Because then there's that stress. They're not spending time with each other like before. They're not there with each other anymore. Do you get my point? And sometimes their schedules are different. It's very tough. But sometimes that's what they want because they want to afford things. It's a choice. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. And people hate to hear reality sometimes. People hate to hear reality. I'm like, no, you can try in this. And we can, no. The reality is, it's not going to happen. You want it, it's a choice, you want to do it, go ahead, do it. But if you want to be content and be happy with what you have, I really think, personally, I've seen the best of couples were the ones who were struggling financially. I've seen the best of the most loving relationships ever. And subhanAllah, I know this person. And him and his wife, they got married. And subhanAllah, they were struggling financially like crazy. Like, to the point that it was very hard on them. As soon as the situation changed, he got a better job, she got a job, they started making a lot of money, they bought a house. 3 months into buying the house, they got divorced. They used to be an example that the whole town would talk about. The love relationship between this couple. SubhanAllah. So sometimes, like Imam says in Dua al-Iftitah, Dua al-Iftitah in Shahr Ramadan that we recite, لَعَلَّ الَّذِي أَبْطَأَ عَنِّي هُوَ خَيْرٌ لِي. Maybe what has been prolonged and what has been kept away from me is actually better for me. Not everyone knows how to react to wealth. So my teacher said to me something, is that fear people in 2 different stages. The first stage, sudden wealth. Sudden wealth. Someone wins the lottery. A friend of yours wins the lottery. Fear them. Because they switch. Do you realize they change? They change on the spot. And that's what is referred to in French as the nouveau riche. Right? They don't know how to, they can't comprehend what just happened. It's like the second stage, sudden loss of wealth. So sudden wealth and then sudden loss of wealth. Sudden loss of wealth also. And I did deal with certain cases where people wanted to attain a divorce because of that. They couldn't maintain anymore the same lifestyle. And then guess what? Now they cannot be with each other anymore. But then what does that tell me? That means what was really combining them from the beginning? Right or wrong? What was the common factor between them from the beginning? If it's not going to be the children, and if it's not going to be the love, and it's not going to be the appreciation, that it's not going to be like really understanding that this is your spouse that's been with you all this time, then guess what? They were never for you to begin with.
Is it accurate that Islam encourages women to marry within their status? Financial status?
Islam gives the right for a woman to request certain conditions in her marriage in accordance to her financial status. Do you understand the difference? So it's one thing to say, okay, let's say, for example, a girl comes from a wealthy family. Wealthy family. She lived in a mansion all her life. She had maids. Okay? And let's say she meets a guy. Or a guy proposes to her. She doesn't know him. He just comes and proposes to her. She has the right, technically, fiqh, pure fiqh, technically, she has the right to request a mansion. Do you get the point?
Yeah.
Why? Because that's how she lives currently. If she drives a Beamer, she has the right to say, I would like a car the same exact level.
But not that's something they should do before. Like, that's an expectation that should be set
Well, of
before.
course.
Right? Because I think sometimes it's like, okay, no, I'll be fine. And then after nikah, you have these expectations that you didn't voice at the beginning, you know?
Which is wrong. Because the thing is that, well, first of all, okay, why did you accept to marry a person who's not? If that's what you want in marriage. If that's what, I'm saying, listen, we're not going to discuss now ethically is the right thing or the right time mindset to have. You know, as I said, see, the more you live and the more you go through experiences, sometimes you understand. It's easy to judge a person and say, oh my God, she's materialistic, he's materialistic. Not necessarily. Sometimes people are honest with themselves. They're saying, listen, this is how I know how to live. And it's better for the other person to know. It's actually a good thing to know. You know what I mean? Like, this is the standard that I'm used to. I don't want to be unfair to you or unfair to, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to involve you in a relationship that you're not going to be able to keep up with me. And I don't want to see you struggle. And in fact, a wise man would be like, yeah, you know what? Thank you so much. I wish you the best, and I'm sure I'm going to go find someone else. There's the reality, because how are we going to keep up with that? You know, it's easy to make promises and the castles in the sky and I will do this and I will, no, not necessarily. So she has the right to. Right. Now, but does that mean, like, if she marries a person or she accepts to marry a person who's not from a financial status? No, she doesn't have the right to request these things. Well, because you married him, he's not from your financial status to begin with. Now, is it recommended to say that when I want to get married, I want a person from my financial status? No, it's not. Because Islam did not put the criteria of marriage finance. It put the criteria of marriage ability. There's a difference between both. So ability, as in, like, you have the right to say, like, is this person able to work? Yeah.
I think if that precedence is not put forth before the marriage, that's where we get into, like, issues like financial stress spiraling into mental health, right? Yeah. Because that's where, you know, you like one person, she's in a different socioeconomic, you know, background, and these precedents are not being put forth. And then that's where that burden of the shoulders and the, you know, the mental stress starts to tie in, right? So it's a very good point.
100%. Something that most couples will face at some point is money. Stress in finance is one of the top reasons that couples fight. But I don't think it's just about money. I think it has a lot to do with security, control, trust, and even personal values. Sometimes you have one partner who's worried about paying the bills while the other one is thinking about taking a vacation. The alignment is just not there. And money can really affect your mood. It touches everything we do, right? So it's definitely going to be able to affect your mood, your sleep, anxiety levels, even your physical health. If especially one or both partners are constantly feeling stressed about money, you will start to see a chain reaction to it. I think that's why it's so important that you talk about money before it becomes a problem. Understand each other's money mindset. Even create a financial plan together. What is it that you two are looking at for the future? And I think especially in Eastern cultures, it's nice and common to be able to really avoid the mine versus yours mentality. And I'm not saying this works for every single marriage, but for most, even if you're bringing in your own incomes, it's good to have an our mentality and just to recognize when the stress is really taking that toll.
And again, I'm not sure about how your culture is, but I know that I've dealt with Indo-Pak culture, and I was shocked to find out it doesn't exist in our culture, that sometimes the girl that ends up providing for that groom.
Alhamdulillah, it's not the case.
It's
Usually it's the
case.
woman who asks, for the dowry. Yeah. But I think I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but our women in our community, in the Khoja community, are very pushed on to ask for Quran as a dowry or a prayer mat, something simple. Because we hear the story of Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima and Bibi, with their dowry and everything. But
it wasn't a prayer mat.
No, I understand that. No, of course, but I think that's where I feel like I'm not saying it's wrong.
No.
But we give this sense of like be as humble as possible. But what ends up happening, not in all marriages, a couple will get married, and then there's issues, and the woman has nothing to fall back on, any financial security, right? It's because obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong, a dowry a woman asks for her husband in our religion, that's hers.
That's true.
So if she asks for money, for property, it's hers, right? So I think that's where sometimes a lot of problems exist in our community. Not the only problems.
Just chiming into that, I think it's also a lack of information and education on
Absolutely.
like the cultural part of it. I don't think it's cultural. I think it's just a lack of education. Because as we've grown and as we raise kids now and are more self-aware of what a woman should be asking in mahar, that changes everyone's perspective. Because same thing, when I was getting married, not that I was requested to ask of the simplest things, but that's all I knew. Nothing better than that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But then when you do more research on what mahar is supposed to serve for a woman, and if it's a financial backup plan in case, God forbid, something happens to your husband or in case of a divorce, then you're prepared now financially to kind of move on. So I think it's just a lack of education. And I think it's important now to educate our girls as they're growing on what. Not that to go and ask for a mansion from a person who can't afford a mansion.
Absolutely.
But whatever in his financial capacity is to provide for her during her marriage. I also think, I know of a couple of friends who go into marriages with so much debt because they've paid for such a hefty wedding. And then so that's why that financial stress in that first 5-10 years is now you're trying to just pay off what you've already spent on a wedding.
It also becomes keeping up with the Joneses too, right?
Sure.
You have a friend circle and it's like, his daughter got married in a extravagant wedding,
okay. So it does
and
happen
now people will possibly take out a loan if they have to kind of match or exceed that wedding. I'm not saying it happens everywhere, but it's I wouldn't be surprised.
It's something that happens quite often, though. Yeah.
And I think the financial comparisons happens a lot. People who are not at par with that wealth feel left out, feel like they don't fit in, and that's where the argument starts to come in from husband and wife, where she could have been content, but her surroundings and the environment are kind of playing a huge factor.
It does make it tough. I see it in younger married couples, like the newer married couples right now, that you're looking at what bag she's carrying and what shoes she's wearing or what car he's driving. And all of a sudden now you're pressuring not just your husband, like for yourself, but even for him that, hey, look, he's driving that car. We should get a car like this. Or, oh, look, there's living in this kind of a house. We should get a house like this, And it makes it tough. It puts a lot of stress on both the husband and the wife.
But I think contentment is big. I think in Islam it does say when it comes to wealth, you look at people under you, not above you. In spirituality is when you look at people above you and not below. In wealth, there's always going to be someone who's got more than you. So if you're going to compare yourselves to them, people with money have different problems. Just as he said, the couple who got money then got divorced. So Allah will test you with money, wealth, health, and children. One of these three things. So it could go either way. Either you could have the money and have problems, or you could have children and have problems, and so on. It could go either way. So I think contentment is the biggest thing in a marriage. You have to be happy with what you have, strive together as a couple, you support each other to excel, but don't compare.
It's hard though. Like you have to be honest. It's very easy to do, right? Like I feel like I catch myself doing it sometimes. You know, first I'm like, oh, maybe I should get like a new bag, and I'm like, do I really need that new bag? Like, do I like? I don't. I'm fine. Like what I have is fine. You know, and like be content with it.
You can put your put your phone in it. You can put your wallet in it. We're good.
Like again, who you're surrounding yourself with. People are happiest with the simplest of things. I know it puts a lot of pressure on marriages, but I think it's important to always look at. It should not add value to your life, like what kind of bag we carry, what kind of car we drive, because I think our main focus should be how do we get closer to Allah? Like how do we set our kids on the right path? How do we increase our iman? I think those comparisons are healthy, but I feel like I know it's very easy to fall into, but I think if your circle is the right circle and your environment is the right one, then it's not so hard.
Absolutely. I think it really is about the people that you surround yourself with, because obviously you tend to get influenced by the people you're around, right? The friends you keep, the people you're with, the environment you're in. All of these things really have an effect on you and on your marriage. It's just, I think it takes time for us to realize that sometimes. It's a part of those growing pains that we're talking about, you know?
I think the reality is, right, we can say all this, but as you said, we are human beings, and you said we judge, we compare, we are very social beings. Connection is a very big point in our lives, yeah? And with the increase of social media, internet, and all this stuff, expectations have changed. And because we're trying to make connections with whatever it is, with our environment, with our friends, with our community, with any even strangers online that we connect with, you end up falling in this trap.
Sure.
And this is how your expectations, even in marriage, become very distorted. And that leads to so much mental strain and so much financial strain, so much pressure in general.
Following up on that also, so because you asked me also what other things that have you been exposed to in terms of like the reasons of divorce, you know, and then we brought up the financial perspective and so forth. So I said that, and I said finance, and I said even like with it. And then another thing is not only comparison, I believe it or not, I believe it's surrounding.
That's
friends. Friends is a big factor. You don't understand how effective it is. It's I've seen it. Seen it on numerous occasions and so many times. And yes, homes have been wrecked because of friends, because of the wrong advice, because of what is referred to sometimes as motivational lectures, and they're not motivational at all. They're literally, you know, speeches telling you to just literally rebel and hit the road and do your thing. You know what I mean? And I would say one of the main reasons of divorce is not having the base in marriage. Like not having the base in marriage. It's funny that when people want to get divorced, they go to the Mulana. Has anybody ever thought about going to the Mulana before getting married?
Conflict resolution should be done way ahead. There's one thing that we talk about a lot in mental health is, which I think is reality in all our lives, your reaction is on you. You regulating your feelings and learning how to regulate your feelings are what lead to good communication, what lead to you being able to resolve conflicts in your life. It's never going to go away, but how you handle it is on you, and this should be done way, way ahead of time.
100%.
It's not something that should come when now, okay, I have a problem now.
So Sakina was saying how in marriages, a lack of communication, personal ego, and emotional baggage serve as core struggles that couples must navigate. We know that poor communication can lead to resentment, anxiety, and emotional distance in a couple. And a spouse with past traumatic experiences, they often tend to project their deregulation into their marriage or even their spouse, which we understand often leads to unresolved conflict. It's crucially important, in my opinion, in a marriage to hold yourself to a high level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. An emotionally intelligent person can then recognize where they're going wrong, how they're getting triggered, and then the ideal way to navigate through the challenges of marriage through open, honest communication with their spouse. You know, couples can go through therapy, and I believe a strong support, whether it's a family system or friends, can really help the couple navigate through those challenges. But I think it's very important to have a high level of emotional maturity when you're communicating with your spouse.
So a good question would be, What are the key signs of poor communication in a marriage?
What are the key signs of poor communication in marriage?
I think some of the most common ones we've heard, and I'm sure even experienced ourselves, is avoidance or neglect, meaning to simply avoid communicating altogether when things get tough or when there is a conflict, avoiding that conflict and sweeping things under the rug. That's definitely not a good sign of communication. Also, at times, not actively listening to your partner or being dismissive of their feelings and any input that's given. It can really lead to misunderstandings and resentment in a marriage.
I think one of the other ones we spoke about was indifference.
Yeah, that lack of care or effort or interest in the relationship anymore, not having any kind of reaction to anything anymore. That's definitely dangerous. It's something that it's a situation you don't want to be in. You don't want your marriage to get to a point where you are now indifferent to your partner and his or her feelings or what's happening in your relationship.
I think it just transparency. If you're keeping something secret from one another, I think that would be a great sign of poor communication. So just like when you said about transparency between one another, I think you nailed it, that would be a good form of communication.
If I were to be asked personally, is that what is the most important thing in marriage? What is the most important factor in marriage in general? And I know many people are going to say love. I don't believe in that. I would tell you it's communication. I'll tell you why. See, the majority of the times we tend to step in a marital relationship, the couple tend to step in what I call the comfort zone. Meaning that because in the back of your head you've been married to this person for a long time, you would always assume that they're just going to understand you. So you don't need to express yourself. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So you don't need to express yourself. Sometimes what ends up happening is that because of this, it creates a gap. And there are many times that you could see couples doing a lot of things together. But believe it or not, you can totally figure out that there's poor communication with each other. Because they're always wanting to have an external factor to kind of combines them together. I'm not saying that those external factors are wrong. No. It's always good. Renewing the language of love is extremely encouraged in the religion of Islam. To renew the language, always revive the language of love between the two. That's extremely important in the religion of Islam. But the lack of communication in this regard is just coming from the expectation that this person are going to understand you, or this person is just going to know what is wrong. No, it does not happen. No, you need to communicate your feelings. But you need to communicate your feelings. On the other hand, and please focus on this point a lot, what you need to also accept is that those feelings might not be facts. Do you understand that? You need to accept that those feelings might not be facts. Just because you communicate your feelings, that doesn't mean that the other person has to adhere to your feelings. No, because those are feelings. They're not facts. When they're facts, sure, you have the right to have expectation from your spouse and say, you know what, oh, this is a fact. This is what's actually happening. But you cannot base an issue upon because that's just how I feel. But that's not a fact. It's absolutely not a fact. Yeah.
Could it work side by side? Like the fact that something's happening is making me feel this way.
Exactly. Okay. No, of course. But that's not feeling anymore. That's a fact. Okay. Do you get my point? That's a fact. That's not a feeling. But it cannot say, I feel this way, hence I'm going to conclude that this is the issue. Mm-hmm. No, it's absolutely wrong. By the way, I'm going to tell you something. For example, in men's psyche, the most thing that triggers men, assumptions. Assumptions. I'll give you an example. You know when a man is sitting down sometimes? Like, men tend to sit down sometimes, literally stare at the wall. Like, no, for real.
Could have all nodding.
Yeah. Because that is the truth. That is the truth. You're just sitting down. A woman comes and asks the man, what are you thinking of?
Nothing.
He's saying the truth. It's literally nothingness. In your mind, you're not going to accept that answer. You know why? Because it's impossible for a woman not to be thinking of something. Allah created her in this way. Because there's always something going on with your mind. There's always something going on. There's some things that, you're thinking about a million things. And that's why, scientifically speaking, women are very good at multitasking. But that's just how they are. But men are not as good as women in terms of multitasking.
I was actually listening to a comedian, and he explains how the difference between, for example, how a man's brain is wired and how a woman's brain is wired. So for a man, everything in his mind is like boxes in a shelf.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you want to talk about marriage, there's a box for marriage. You want to talk about family, there's a box about family.
There you go.
Right? Everything's put away. Now, the funny part is men have so many boxes, but the box they spend the most time on alone is a box that's called nothing. That box is the box that's always open, always available at all times. But when you come to a man, and then you tell him you want to talk about something, that's what they do. Now, a woman's brain, now once again, it's according to the comedian, is like a bunch of wires. Like if you think about it, so it's all like one spool of wires. So the family is connected to the marriage. The marriage is connected to the children. The children is connected to this. So that's
and all of a sudden, why is this wall white?
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
We should paint it green.
Exactly. Because everything is like a wire, so everything is related to everything.
Well, and I mean this genuinely. A part of contentment is accepting the nature that you have. Like there is something in your nature. Like for example, when a woman says, "Oh, my husband is too jealous," he's supposed to be jealous. Do you know? He's supposed to be like that. Oh, he's overprotective. No, he's supposed to be like that. Or else he won't be truly a man. That means he's lacking a lot of traits. That means lacking, and that can come from a single mother house, by the way. That can be an effect of being raised in a single mother home. Or even being or growing up without having a role model as a man in your life. Jordan Peterson has this really interesting thing. It's called the Peter Pan theory. You know what the Peter Pan theory is? Peter Pan, he's a boy that never wanted to grow up, right? And why? Simply because the role model he had in his life of a man was Captain Hook, and he never wanted to be that. And there's many men that are like that. There are many men that refuse to grow up. They are still living in that stage. And that's simply because either not having a good role model in their life, or never a role model in their life, or having the bad role model in their life. So that's why they always don't want it to stay young. There are natures that we have, and we need to accept that.
Sometimes you covered in one of your lectures 2 days ago, excessive love of ease.
Ease, exactly. Right?
Yeah. I agree with that. But I do like ease, to make life easier.
Oh, 100%.
So the avoiding of conflict. So, sometimes let's say something triggers me. I will just avoid it if I can. Like early on for example, when we got married.
Oh, totally.
Things, whatever you like, whatever she likes. And there's some things that you may not like. But at that first year, you may not say these things. The second year, like, can we kind of work on these things that you're doing? And maybe she'll tell you what you're doing wrong. So I feel like sometimes what happens with me, I don't know if it happens with other guys, is that I will just avoid conflict from my peace of mind. I will just, if it's something I can ignore, I'll just ignore and walk away.
So the avoiding of conflict may work for men, right? But we have to understand that, like you said, we're built differently. Our natures are different.
Absolutely.
So our communication, our love languages are different.
True.
I think it's imperative in a marriage to learn how your wife likes to communicate versus how you communicate. Because sometimes this avoidance of conflict can result in resentment because now you've avoided talking about a topic that may be important to her and not to you. And so then you start to end up now building it in yourself or in your heart. And then when things blow up, then they go out of proportion.
Because I feel like men can avoid, and I'm not speaking for you, and I am speaking for you, but I feel like avoiding conflict, I think that's a good thing too, because sometimes in that moment, it's not the right time to talk about it. You know what I mean? So if that's something that you can do as the man, that's great. But then it needs to be something that you come back to and discuss. Sometimes you avoid.
But I also think men don't have that great of a memory. You bring something up 2 days later and the iron's not hot anymore, they'll be like, what are you talking about? It never happened.
Or they never told you something was wrong, and then 3 months later, well, you
that
do
is
this,
true.
this, and this. And I'm like, well, you never told me that I do this,
I agree with you.
Exactly.
So that's why I said,
and that's why
I would say, sure, as much as I might agree with avoiding conflict, I don't think that that's the right mindset. I don't want to sound like a typical alpha in this regard, but I would like to fairly ask a question. And this is what I believe. And I've said this to many close friends that I have, people that I dealt with in terms of conflict with in their marriage. But a worst thing that a man can do is to also not display power in front of his wife and show her that I can put you in your place when I need to.
You're the man of the house.
Now, don't take this in a negative way. I know that it's going to trigger many people, and I know it doesn't, but it is in the nature of a woman to be attracted to her man if he does have that ability. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Again, I don't want to sound offensive. I don't want anybody to think that, oh, no, I think no. As in what sense? Is that when she's being in an emotional ball, a ball of emotions, and she wants to fight. Like she wants to, you know what I mean? Like now she wants to fight. There are moments that men want to fight. Now you want to fight, but she doesn't want to fight anymore. All what I'm saying is that do not bicker. It's a sign of a man, of a wise person, not to bicker. You know, be the leader. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you that role of being a leader. Then be the leader. Again, just like a manager in a company, what is he going to sit down and do? Sit down and fight with his employees? No, he's going to lead them. So be the leader in this regard, okay? Why? Because there's something, I will agree with you on it, and I have to admit it. You're right. Men, as much as we pretend that we do know how to shove things under the carpet, they're never shoved, no. They will come up. But because it's in our nature too. We don't have a strong memory to that extent. Mm-hmm. You know, but again, I think men and women have selective memories. So women are good at remembering certain things, men are good at remembering other things, right?
I feel like a man can remember the things that trigger him. Like if your wife triggers you, you're going to remember that she said this, that she triggered you by doing this or saying.
Listen, let me be honest with you and let me be frank with you. Guys, I'm telling you a lot of secrets about men. I'll tell you something. Insults. Mm-hmm. No man should accept it. And no human being in general should accept it, right? I don't believe that. And it can happen. And I've seen it happen. I don't think that anyone should insult, resort to insults. You got my point?
Low blows, yeah.
Yeah. And then that's very wrong. And it's something that people will have a very hard time getting over it.
Isn't it where they say that in a marriage, men commands respect, while the men's maybe love language is respect.
Yes.
While the wife's is love. So
but even
respect is a big thing for a man.
Gratitude and appreciation. I'll give you an example. I came across this hadith one time, and I'm not going to lie to you. Subhanallah, astaghfirullah, but even it's a hadith by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I felt like, really? It's one of those moments where like, really? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, when a man says to his wife, I love you, it stays in her mind for years. And I said, like, I literally had a hard time understanding this. And I'm like, oh, just that? That's it? You see, but again, it does make a difference. SubhanAllah, it does make it. And like you said, I do believe in respect. Listen, respect has to stay in a relationship. It has to be maintained in a relationship.
So when you say, like, put her in her place, what are you referring
exactly
to?
The point. You see, it's one thing to say, we could agree that a woman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created her more emotional than a man, right? And sometimes, like you said, you know, when everything gets mixed up in a bowl, and then she starts going at it. She wants to fight. She might say things. Like, I don't know, for example, something that would really trigger a man. You say, I don't know, maybe this marriage is not working out. Maybe I need to be divorced, let's say. So that's something that does trigger a person. Maybe you should learn how to be able to control her in this regard. You got my point? Like, he's able to control her reaction in this regard. Tell her, no, you're not going to talk to me this way. Or, for example, like, you're not going to talk to me this way, and we're going to end this topic right now, and it's not going to be brought up again. Not now. He needs to take leadership.
I think that kind of goes back to what you said about emotional intelligence, right?
So I think I'll play the therapist role.
Yeah, sure, please. No.
I think it is a in-between thing where all of you are right in your own ways. You cannot avoid conflict. Avoiding conflict leaves the woman feeling like you are indifferent to her. And once a woman feels indifferent, there is a part of her that becomes quiet. And I think at the same time, you're very right. When one is high, one has to calm it down, the other one. And women do react well to that. We love to be taken care of. So in an argument, if I'm at my high and you're like, listen, this is not going to go anywhere, we will come back to this, but maybe not now. Yeah, that I think is a much better way than avoiding conflict or just letting her stay in that way, like in that high note. There's one thing that I think worked in our marriage, but I think it's very good, is you have to know your hard no's. Like there's a hard no, let's say your man does not want you to ever bring up divorce. That's a really good hard no. I know this. I know that if I push this in an argument, I have pushed boundaries now. Now I will have a reaction that I may not be ready for. So these are hard no's that we should know about from before. Let's say the woman's hard no is, okay, when it comes between your mother and me, I need you to listen to me because I am your wife. Let us talk about it. Don't ignore me. And then we will work towards it together. I need you to feel like you're on my team as well. No, not saying don't be a son, but also be my husband. Do not be someone who's just in between, because that doesn't work. So I think hard no's are very good to know ahead of time. Again, back to emotional regulation, back to learning how to deal with conflict ahead of time.
Yeah, no. So for example, let's say there was a case scenario as a therapist, again, and I'm genuinely wanting to understand this. So let's say there's, like you said, the type of woman that doesn't back down. She doesn't want to drop the gloves. She wants to keep going.
Yeah.
Don't you think that that's when her man needs to display power? And that's when he needs to tell her, and I'm not saying that that's a healthy relationship. I really believe that, because listen, men are different than women. As a man, if your wife comes back to apologize to you about something that she repeatedly did so many times wrong, you would still accept that, because it's in our nature to be the nurturing ones. It's like a dad, it's like a father. But a woman will never accept the man that she insulted once and he took it. She will never look at him the same. It's in her psyche. It's in her nature. She will never look at him the same. Impossible. So what I'm saying is that, let's say, for example, no, she wants to escalate it more.
Yeah.
Don't you think that, no, he does need to learn he does need to know to display that powerful role that I am the protective man, I am the lion of the den, and you need to be the lioness.
You're right that, to begin with, that's not a healthy relationship. There is a huge lack of security in that relationship already, so there's a lot of work to be done first. But the other way, yes, I am also in the belief, forget as a therapist, forget mental health, in my own relationship, I do appreciate husband is the beginning of the hierarchy.
It's attractive. Just like as men, it is so attractive, whether we like it or not. Can we agree on something? Modern science has been trying for years to change men, and they have failed because we don't change. We do get attracted to submission. Meaning that I want my wife to be submissive to me, not to another man. No, to another man I want to be the lioness. No, you stand your ground. It's the Quran says it. Do you know what the Quran talks about? It talks about the tone of voice. So the Quran, when he talks about the tone of voice, he says, when a woman deals with men in public, it says, وَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ لَهُمْ بِالْقَوْلِ. Do not speak to them in a soft tone, to a stranger, to a non-mahram. Why? The Quran says, فَيَطْمَعُ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَض. So the one who has sickness in his heart will get infatuated. Because the tone of voice makes a big difference. Then when he comes and he talks about the marital relationship, what does he tell the wife?
Talk with soft voice.
Yeah. Says, speak to him in that flirtatious tone. So just like we get attracted to that, a woman does get attracted to power. Whether she likes it or not, that's in her nature. She will always get attracted to that. It is something attractive in her eyes.
I agree with you. And I want to go deeper into that.
Interesting.
Yeah, because of course I want to go deeper into this. But I just want to point out that there is a reason behind why women might be attracted to that and why men might be attracted to the opposite.
Yeah.
The reason that I believe, this is from my own readings, from my own thing. Please, all of you, do your own research. As I always put the plug in. Always a disclaimer. It signifies protection. Yes? This is a man who is ambitious. He's a man who can protect me, protect my kids, protect my future. So this is who I want. Women, as you said, are always thinking. We are on the go from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. A man who can be like, I will take care of this right now. Even in an argument, is like, oh, wow, you are giving me that. Okay, that piece. But there's a difference between that and ignorance.
Oh, no, 100%.
Ignoring your wife when she is at the height of her pain,
100%.
because that fight is also coming from pain, is wrong. Yeah, it's the same way, like the way you said, it is, you are my protector, you're my everything, but I'm also your nurturer, I'm your supporter.
I have a question to be clear. How, in your opinion, how should a husband do that? In that situation where things are escalating, how does the man, the husband, show that he's the lion?
He knows what he's doing.
I think it's important to make sure we're saying that. That doesn't mean that you speak louder or you wouldn't try to stop the argument or that he should be aggressive. It's like what you just said, right? To kind of de-escalate, to calm the situation down. That's what, as a man, he should be doing. Because I feel like some people might take that as, oh, that means that I can be the one who gets angry, who gets louder, who's like, no, we're not talking about this, and that's not what we're trying to say. Right? I want to make that very clear.
But in this one, that's when I said earlier, the men want respect.
Yes.
So let's say the wife is getting loud.
Yeah.
Now she's crossing that boundary of respect. And that's when the man will show his alpha, saying, okay, you need to stop that. I'm not going to accept that. So I think that's
Shut
what
it
he
down
meant.
then, yeah.
I think by shutting it down is because now you're crossing the respect boundary that we have set, which I have, which you're not going to cross. And then she calms down, and then you can have a proper conversation.
Yeah.
It's the disrespect the husband is getting at that time is which he's going to shut down.
Since we're on the topic, let's talk about some ways that we can resolve conflict. Because let's be real, no matter how much love there is, disagreements will happen, conflict will happen. And that's the idea, right? That these arguments are going to happen no matter what. So instead of avoiding them, let's learn how to actually navigate them and strengthen our relationships. So there are some ways that we can do this. There are some techniques. One of them, and I think it's the most important one, is active listening. And it doesn't mean literally just standing there while your partner is talking and waiting for your turn to speak. I mean real, true listening by being present and really hearing them out. What we do even in therapy, it's reflecting back what you heard. There's this great exercise that we learn, and it's called speaker-listener technique. And what it is that when one person talks, the other one listens without any interruption or jumping in to fix things. And after they're finished, the listener repeats back what they heard in a paraphrase form. So saying something like, I hear that what you're saying is, and then the content. So it sounds very simple, but trust me, when couples start doing this, it changes everything. Because now instead of assuming, you're now actually understanding.
I'll be honest though, I feel like that's so much easier said than done. In that moment, it's hard to stop and really listen without reacting or becoming defensive. So I guess ideally, this isn't something you want to wait to implement only when you're actually in an argument, but more so something to try and do more regularly in your marriage, right? But how would we do that?
Let's talk about how you can bring up some tough conversations. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as human beings in general is using you statements.
Yeah.
You never listen. You always forget. You don't care. Do those things sound familiar? The problem is that it instantly puts your partner on the defense. So for that, I think we should try flipping it. Use an I statement to express how you feel without pointing those fingers. You're avoiding the blame all of a sudden. Now, instead of you saying you never help around the house, you actually say, I feel very overwhelmed when I have to handle all these chores alone. Can we maybe find a way for you to help me out or split them up? It keeps the conversation so much more open instead of going straight into war and battle. And now, obviously, I'm going to talk about some science. There's a relationship expert, and his name is Dr. John Gottman. And he's done some amazing work into relationships. He's spent decades studying couples. I think everyone should go out and get some of his books and read them. He's got some amazing information on conflict resolution, marriages, relationships, all the good stuff. One of his biggest findings is that happy couples have at least 5 positive interactions for every negative one. It was called the 5-to-1 ratio. And he explained that for every moment of criticism or frustration, there should be at least 5 moments that are positive things like kindness, laughter, affection, or even appreciation to balance it out. So let's say next time you're feeling tension in your relationship, ask yourself first, am I building up those positive moments as well? Things like a quick text on a random day saying, I'm thinking of you. A hug when you pass one another in the kitchen. A small compliment. These are very small but very easy things. And they may sound so insignificant, but they make such a big difference. They show your partner that I'm listening.
Yeah.
I'm here with you. While we're talking about this, let's get back to what you were talking about the wife that pokes and toxicity in general. Gottman also talks about this, the dark side of relationships. And there's a concept that he has, and it's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. In this, there are 4 toxic behaviors that he explains, if left unchecked, can really destroy your relationship. So let me just break that down a little bit. The first one is criticism. Constantly attacking your partner's character instead of the actual problem. Saying things like, you are so lazy. Imagine if you flipped it over and said, I feel frustrated when I come home and see the dishes piling up. It gives a solution in the sentence, and you've made it about the problem, not about your partner. The second one was defensiveness. Every single time something comes up, you make excuses instead of owning up to your part, taking accountability. I didn't do that because you never remind me. Imagine if you said instead, I see why that upsets you. I'll try and be more mindful next time. And the third one is contempt. Things like rolling your eyes, mocking, making your partner feel so inferior to you. This was actually one of the biggest predictors for divorce for him. So if this is happening, we really need to check ourselves. The final one was stonewalling, shutting down completely, avoiding a conversation or walking away instead of addressing the issue. And that's what we talked about, right? When a man avoids the conversation, you have to think, are you stonewalling her? And this goes both ways. The good news is that these patterns can be reversed. And it happens when both partners are really willing to recognize them and make changes. It's not easy to look at yourself and think, oh, these are some bad habits that I have and I need to change them. And I think one of the last tips I would give, it's very much connected to the last one, is taking a break. Just taking that pause. If an argument is spiraling, hit the pause button. Like you said, if a husband feels like he's being disrespected, or when you see emotions are running so high and we're not thinking clearly, just take at least 20 minutes to cool down. It can help you return to the conversation with a more calmer and clearer mindset. So when things are getting too heated, take that break, but take a shorter break. So like Zainab said, the iron is still hot, but also make sure you come back to that discussion, but that you're doing it from a better space.
I totally salute you for this.
Yeah, I feel that this advice would be also good for people who've been married for a long time, like 5, 10, 15 years even. It still applies.
Yeah, see, at the end of the day, it isn't conflict that destroys your relationship. Conflict is inevitable. It's the disconnection. If you're arguing, it can still mean that you care. The key is just learning how to argue well, with respect, with understanding, and with the goal of strengthening, not tearing down your relationship.
You know, I really have to appreciate that it all comes back down to respect, having respect for one another and maintaining that respect for your spouse. Such an important thing to keep in mind, that even in those moments where you're struggling and arguing with each other, to remember that you should maintain that respect. And it's not always easy to do, but I think if we implement some of these techniques and strategies that you've shared with us, it may be easier to accomplish that. Okay, so that's a wrap for the first part of our Shaadi and Struggles episode with Sheikh Wael. Thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. We've talked through some of the challenges couples face early on in marriage and shared some practical tips for handling disagreements with respect and understanding. But don't go anywhere, because in part 2, we're tackling a topic that's been on a lot of minds, living with in-laws. It's a reality for many couples, and there's a lot that goes hand in hand with it. Let's be honest, it's not always the easiest thing to navigate. We'll be talking about how to set healthy boundaries, manage expectations, and handle those sometimes tricky family dynamics. So stay tuned, and inshallah, we'll see you next time.